How does a TV series about criminal gangs of the past threaten modern Russia? How was the world of Soviet gangsters organized? Why did Soviet children beat each other with rebar and cast iron kettles? What rules did the criminals of the Soviet Union live by? And why were they feared by the whole country? Make yourselves comfortable. In this video, we will tell you everything about organized crime in the USSR, about which the scandalous series, The Word of a Patsan, Blood on the Pavement. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to support our work. We begin. Recently in Russia, they filmed a truthful series about the life of criminal gangs of the 70s-80s. The most shocking thing about this story is that the gangs included a lot of children and teenagers. At that time, Russia was still part of the USSR. The Soviet Union was following the path of communism and socialism. Despite the fact that the authorities praised this regime in every possible way and showed it only from the good side, many people were dissatisfied with it. In the Soviet Union, the economy was not a market economy, but a planned one. The budget of each individual depended on the budget of the state. The attempt to build a socially equal society led to the fact that many people became equal in one thing: poverty. You have probably heard about the shortages of goods in the Soviet Union and the huge queues for food. All this increased the discontent of the citizens, but they were very afraid to speak out about it. For any dissatisfaction with the authorities, people could be sent to special prisons where they would be forced to work in the north. There they were used as slave labor. They built railroads in Siberia. Those who were dissatisfied with the Soviet Union especially strongly were even shot. At the time of the emergence of the gangs, the laws were not so harsh anymore, especially for children. That's why children were recruited into crime. Their parents were always at work. Kids spent all their time on the streets, so it wasn't hard to recruit them. When they committed crimes, they just tried to re-educate them. They were taught to. The consequences of being part of criminal groups were explained to them. But often children did not take this seriously and continued to help criminals. In the 70s and 80s, these groups of delinquent children became huge. There were especially many of them in Kazan. No one knew what to do with them. And it is about this phenomenon that the series The Word of a Patsan, Blood on the Pavement. The groups appeared on the territory of the Republic of Tatarstan. It is located in the center of European Russia at the confluence of two rivers, the Volga and the Kama. During the Soviet Union, people there spoke two languages, Tatar and Russian. Production of airplanes, polyethylene, computer equipment, leather, fur, chemical reagents, auto parts, etc. was actively developing in the Republic. People came there to work. If in 1959, 667,000 people lived in the capital of Tatarstan, in 1989, more than 1 million. They spent most of their time at the factories, because of which children were often left alone. In the center of the capital of the Tatar USSR there were many slums, which are reservoirs of criminality. When new people came to Kazan, they were literally infected with these ideas. Otherwise, they would not have been able to survive. People huddled together to help each other and fight others. Poverty was a contributing factor. Over time, these groups became disastrously numerous. The authorities pretended that nothing was happening so as not to recognize the problem. This only unleashed the criminals, and they became more and more numerous. This will be called the Kazan Phenomenon. There is also a widespread theory according to which the KGB was involved in the blossoming of the Kazan Phenomenon. Allegedly, the Soviet Special Services conducted a social experiment in Kazan to manage groups of young people, whom they later wanted to use for their own purposes. For example, to disperse informals or protest actions, in which the involvement of police forces was undesirable. But this version has never been confirmed. What exactly did the members of these groups do? They didn't really have a specific goal in mind. They just wanted to be part of a social group, have fun and live at least a little better. Teenage groups in Kazan were initially engaged in controlling territories and organizing wall-to-wall fights. For example, the inhabitants of a courtyard would get together and set the rules of their territory. There they could take money from those who were not in their group. They could help local illegal entrepreneurs and take a percentage of their proceeds for patronizing them. Also, their members traveled to other regions to make themselves known. Everyone knew where and whose territory was whose. They did not use drugs and alcohol. and did not even smoke. There was a ban on it from their elders. They went to regular training camps, lived according to Patsan notions, fought among themselves, and treated the teenagers who did not participate in the groups. To do this, they needed to keep themselves in excellent physical shape. So many guys were actively engaged in sports. They organized rocking gyms in their basements and visited them regularly. Sometimes they traveled to rich cities, Moscow and Leningrad. There they would take clothes off the majors and fight with those whose views were not close to them. In August 1978, there was a terrible flash mob of one of the biggest and most influential gangs. Not far from the Tyap-Lyap factory, there was a group called Tyap-Lyap. They decided to raid the territory of their enemies. For this purpose, they took rebar, iron kettles, bricks, hammers, and even pistols. They ran in a large crowd into the territory of their enemies, and on the way they brutally beat up all passers-by. Many suffered seriously from bullet wounds, and one pensioner was even killed. Running through enemy territory and beating up random passers-by was a common format for settling relations back then. Depending on the time of day, such acts of intimidation were called good morning and good evening. But this particular rally caught the attention of the authorities because of the sheer number of victims. 30 members of the gang were detained. The leader of the gang, Zavdad Kantamirov, as well as Iskandar Tzetdinov, Ildar Kayamov, and Alexander Maslensov received the capital punishment, firing squad. Later, Kayamov and Maslensov had their sentences commuted, but the other two criminals were still executed in 1982. Alas, this did not stop street crime. At the time, the children thought it was cool that they were finally noticed by the authorities. Most often, young people joined gangs for two reasons. The first was vocation. In such cases, the young man followed the example of his older comrades who were already in a gang and sincerely shared the values of the boys. Some teenagers sought protection in street clans. The life of young people in Kazan was not easy. Right on the street or in the backyard of a school, a teenager could be beaten up, have a new fashionable jacket or jeans taken off, or even have his money taken away. Joining the group eliminated these problems, giving the new member protection in the form of associates to become part of a gang sewn on. In some cases, it was necessary to pass a ritual test to stand in a sparring match with another gangster or not to be afraid of a fight with provocateurs. The average age of admission to the community was 13 to 14 years old. There was a hierarchy in the groups, like in the army. The youngest were obliged to obey the elders. The youngest age was called first, shell, or husk. Younger members were not assigned important tasks. The most they could do was to stand on the lookout. After a year or two, the shell would move up a step and become supers. They were followed by young, middle, and senior. At the top of the chain were the old men. This was the name given to groupers who had already served in the army. They made the most important decisions and gave orders to their subordinates. These groups had their own laws and were strictly enforced. Every day the members of the group participated in meetings that could not be missed. Only the death of the mother or problems with the police was a valid reason for missing a meeting. The boys never apologized to anyone. They did not cooperate with the police under any circumstances. It was obligatory to give money regularly to the general budget. This was distributed by the older members of the group. Some of it was sent to those who were in prison. Some of it they spent on gym equipment. Some of it was used to buy weapons. You couldn't hit a member of an enemy gang if he was walking down the street with a girl. It was strictly forbidden to run away during scuffles. A fighter had to continue fighting his enemies even if the balance of power was not in his favor. If a kid broke IG, retreated, serious consequences awaited him, up to and including expulsion from the group. At that time, girls were the most unlucky. From the age of 12 to 13, they were on the radar of gang members. Boys could only date virgins. Such relationships were deeply respected by their associates. In case the couple broke up, the girl became used and dirty. She could be raped by anyone who wanted to, and no one would protect her. If someone found out that the couple had oral sex, the girl also became dirty and could be tormented by other young men. This even extended to those who were victims of violence. For this reason, parents literally followed their girls around to make sure they were not abused. But even that didn't always work against a bunch of pumped-up boys with rebar. If violence was inevitable, girls and their families moved to other regions. Girls from particularly religious families did not dare to tell their relatives about it and committed suicide in order not to dishonor the family and not to be subjected to new rapes. There were two ways to leave the group. Either the guy was brutally beaten up by all his former associates, or they all spit on him. Better to get beaten up, because if they spit on you, it would humiliate you, and no other gang would take you in. The exception was those who had served in the army. They were especially respected, so they could participate in the gang's affairs as much as they wanted. When the Soviet Union began to collapse, the factions reached a new level. The authorities became more loyal and the factions became stronger. They went from senseless fights in the streets to business. That's when almost all the gangsters got guns. They stopped running through the streets in droves. Now they just started killing their opponents. In the 90s, after the final collapse of the USSR, the number of murders was simply incredible. Groups began to create separate brigades of killers to shoot their rivals. Alexei Snezinski, a member of Zhilka, is considered to be one of the most notorious assassins in Kazan. He has 8 proven murders to his credit. In 2016, he was released on parole after almost 16 years of imprisonment. According to the criminal's memories, in the 90s it cost about $10,000 to kill a person. For the murder of an official in Moscow, you could earn $25,000, huge money for those times. Then the gang members began to take money not from school children, but from businessmen. They threatened to kill business owners if they did not take them as a shareholder. In return, they offered security and protection of the business from other gangsters. Some could simply kill the entrepreneur and take his business for themselves. In the 2000s, this gangster terror finally came to an end. When Vladimir Putin came to power, he began to impose harsher rules. To hold on to power, he greatly developed the country's security forces. The police force expanded greatly and became brave enough to fight crime. Known gang members went to jail or went abroad with their money. Those who remained at large stopped behaving openly. They are now in hiding. At the same time, the capital of Tatarstan is still periodically shaken by isolated incidents involving youth gangs. In January 2021, in a town near Kazan, about 40 young people staged a brawl with unbelievable violence and armatures as weapons. A few months earlier, 3 teenagers killed a cab driver in Kazan. The massacre received a great resonance. Many saw it as evidence of the return of street gangs. That's why the series The Word of a Patsan, Blood on the Pavement about these groups want to ban, despite its rabid popularity. The fact is that many people saw in it their youth. For some people, participation in gangs was a harmless child's play, where everything went without much consequence. At the same time, a new generation, not familiar with the horrors of that time, begins to romanticize this era. Ordinary people remember with horror the times when they could be robbed and brutally beaten on the street for no particular reason. Now Russia is in a difficult state because of the consequences of the coronavirus and the war with Ukraine. People have to work hard again, and children are often left unsupervised again. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. That way you'll really support our work. See you soon. Bye.